Namaskar. A warm welcome to World News and Indian Perspective on All India Radio. This is Abhineet Shukla and with me is Nishit Kumar, bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment and more. The headlines. Prime Minister Narendra Modi says India's story is clear message to the world that democracy has delivered and will continue to deliver. India bids adieu to country's first Chief of Defence Staff, General Bipin Rawat. Mortal remains of General Rawat and his wife Madhulika consigned to flames with full military honours and a somber 17-gun salute in the national capital. 110 standard Indian citizens and Afghan nationals from Hindu and Sikh community airlifted from Kabul. In Mexico, 54 dead and dozens injured in a road accident. UN agencies expressed grave concern over humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan. As India marches towards administering 150 crore vaccine doses against COVID-19, news about the fresh corona variants is causing a concern. In this situation, we appeal to our listeners to get fully vaccinated at the earliest and also help others get vaccinated. Please follow these 3 simple steps. Wear a face mask, maintain 2 gaz ki duri for social distancing, and focus on hand and face hygiene. For any COVID-related information and guidance, contact the national helpline numbers 011 2397 8046 and 1075. And now the news in detail. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has stressed on the need to constantly improve democratic practices and systems and continue to enhance inclusion, transparency and human dignity. He said democracies can meet the aspirations of citizens and celebrate the democratic spirit of humanity. Mr. Modi said India stands ready to join fellow democracies in these noble endeavours. Mr. Modi was delivering an address at the Summit for Democracy hosted by US President Joe Biden this evening via video conferencing.
Centuries of colonial rule could not suppress the democratic spirit of the Indian people. It again found full expression with India's independence and led to an unparalleled story in democratic nation building over the last 75 years.
The Prime Minister highlighted that Indian story has one clear message to the world that democracy can deliver, has delivered and will continue to deliver. He stated that democracy is not just about of, by or for the people, but also with the people and within the people.
The structural features like multi-party elections, independent judiciary and free media are important instruments of democracy. The basic strength of democracy is the spirit and ethos that lie within our citizens and our society.
The Prime Minister also said that today's assembly provides a timely platform for furthering cooperation among democracies. He said India will be happy to share its expertise in holding free and fair elections and enhancing transparency in all areas of governance through innovative and digital solutions. In today's Hotspot section, we bring you a discussion on India at the Democracy Summit. The participants are Anil Wadhwa, former diplomat, and Sanjay Jha, journalist.
Democracies across the world, rich and established, developing and newly established ones, are grappling with a serious crisis on many parameters. In that context, US President Joe Biden has hosted an international summit for democracy. This summit aims to gather as many as 111 leaders from democratic nations, civil society and influential thought makers to set forth an affirmative agenda for democratic renewal and to tackle the greatest threat faced by democracy today throughout the collective actions. Mr. Wadhwa, what do you think is the significance of this summit at this time in the world?
Sanjay, Mr. Biden had promised a summit of democracies during his election campaign, and he also wants this grouping to send a message to the United States chief rivals, which are China and Russia today, who are actually not invitees, although both of them refer to themselves as democracies. And they have put forward 2 themes, which is Afghanistan and Myanmar, which are likely to be on the agenda as the key points of discussion. But the 3 themes that the White House has put out is defending against authoritarianism, number 1. Second, addressing and fighting corruption. And thirdly, advancing respect for human rights. Now, the issue is that this summit follows a lot of attempts that have been made earlier by the United States and United Kingdom to expand the G7 meeting into a D10 or a group of 10 democracies that would represent about 60% of the global population. That includes Australia, India, and South Korea, along with the G7 grouping. This is a much, much bigger grouping. And in fact, the Carnegie Foundation has put out a release which said that the United States has increased the tent, so to speak, to get as many people in it as possible. And that's why you see 100 odd or 100 plus countries being invited. But on the other hand, there are also some daring omissions, especially in South Asia. So the reason for this, of course, as far as Mr. Biden is concerned, is to make sure that there is a democratic renewal, which he promised during his election campaign around the world. And for that, he is asking for $224 million from the Congress, which is still a work in progress. But the fact that he's consulted with all these democracies at this point in time would give that much of a fillip to that effort. So we can expect that going forward, we will have much more of an effort from the United States to work on those three themes that I've just outlined.
As you rightly pointed out, that there is a little doubt that the relevance and timing of the summit and some glaring omissions from our own neighborhood. Do you think the U.S. has started now realizing the importance of India as a democracy? I mean, today the Prime Minister Modi spoke at the summit, and he obviously, while addressing the summit, has said that India's story has a clear message to the world that democracy can deliver, has delivered, and it will continue to deliver. And democracy is not just only of the people, by the people, for the people, but also with the people. And India would be happy to share its expertise in holding free and fair elections around the world. What was the Prime Minister trying to convey to the world community in his address today?
Today, Prime Minister Modi actually went back 2,500 years, and he said that we have a democratic spirit which is integral to our civilizational ethos, and they were elected Republican city-states in India like Lishwi and Shakya, which were in India 2,500 years ago. So the democratic spirit, he said, was also in the 10th century. There was Uttara Merur. That is the inscription that codified the principles of democratic participation. And then he referred to the colonial rule, where he said that colonial rule actually could not suppress this democratic spirit of the Indian people. And so that led to this unparalleled story in democratic nation building that we have in India for the past 75 years. And here you see the constant growth story in health, education, human well-being at an unimaginable scale because India has such a large population. And therefore that clear message to the world which you referred to is that India democracy can deliver and that democracy has delivered and that it will continue to deliver. That applies first and foremost to India. And then from there on, he referred to multi-party elections, the independent judiciary and the free media, which are so very important as elements of democracy. And then he took over from there to the spirit and ethos that is within our citizen and our societies. So not only it's only for the people, by the people, and for the people, and people who also with the people and within the people. And therefore, he delivered this message that India will be happy to share its expertise in holding free and fair elections, also in enhancing transparency, especially in innovative digital solutions, and that emerging technologies like social media and cryptocurrencies, they are not used against democracy, but to empower democracy. That was a very powerful message there. And I think Prime Minister used this platform very well to deliver that message for India.
We noticed this time that the United States has invited Taiwan for the Summit of Democracy. However, Russia and China are not on the list of invitees. Pakistan claimed that the Prime Minister Khan had skipped attending it. What does this convey? What is U.S. stand about it? U.S. obviously recognize that who are the democratic countries holding free and fair elections, and countries like China and Russia are stifling the democracy. What does this signify?
Sanjay, there is a little bit of geopolitics into the invitee list, so to speak, as well, which is quite normal as far as the United States is concerned, because today, if you look at the political landscape around the world, you have the United States which is engaged in geopolitical contestation with the Chinese. And at the same time, there is an issue with Russians as far as Ukraine is concerned, and in fact, the whole of Europe. So you have a geopolitical undertone to this summit for democracies here. And it's not surprising, therefore, that you have an invitation to Taiwan, which is obviously provocative as far as the Chinese are concerned. But Taiwan is a democracy, and as far as the United States is concerned, it's quite clear that it's inviting only democracies. China does not consider as a democracy, neither does Russia fall into that category. At the same time, you have an important message there that if you are a country which is abiding by the rule of law, then you are supposed to take this forward and spread the message of democracy across the world. That's what the United States wants to do. And President Biden, during his election campaign, had actually emphasized on this issue. And he's just taking that forward here. It's a very contentious issue as far as those who are left out are concerned. And you mentioned about Pakistan. Now, of course, in Pakistan, we have a different situation today where Pakistan is beholden to the Chinese, not only financially, but also in terms of alignments. And don't forget that Imran Khan has tried very hard to try and get that invite from President Biden, which is not materialized. So there is a certain amount of misgivings in Pakistan about what has happened as far as the bilateral relationship is concerned. Then we have the developments in Afghanistan, where clearly the Pakistani ISI is controlling what's happening in Afghanistan, and that is quite at odds with the US policy at the moment. So it was expected that this would happen. It's not very surprising. And going forward, I think the message from the Summit for Democracies would only be that if you are abiding by the rule of law, then you're in this camp, otherwise you're not. But the world cannot be divided ideologically, and the only message which will go out from there is therefore that you should be one which is supporting these basic principles as far as the United States is concerned.
Prime Minister Modi, while addressing the summit, has also talked about how technology could impact democracy, positively or negatively. He said that technology companies should contribute to preserving open and democratic societies. In recent time, we have seen social media giants like Facebook and Twitter and all that playing very significant role in mobilizing the opinion, whether it's positive opinion, negative opinion. And Prime Minister was right that it can actually swing and it can create swings for the democracies. How do you think that the Prime Minister has tried to point out about the role of these technology companies or technologies?
I think the message was that in all areas of governance, there should be transparency. And that also should include innovative digital solutions. And today the world is moving towards innovative digital solutions. So when you have emerging technologies which relate to the social media, that part of technology is advancing very fast as we speak. We also have the issue of cryptocurrency around the world, where India has adopted a very sensible policy of regulation of cryptocurrencies, basically keep taking into account the fact that it should not cause chaos in society, and that this emerging technologies are used to strengthen what we have by way of democracy, not to go against democracy. And that was his message today, that in India we've seen how the social media has been misused in the past. The government has tried to step in. There's been a sort of reaction to that because the big tech companies around the world do not want any controls on the way they run business. And obviously you cannot have that state of affairs going forward, especially in large democracies like India, where you have a variety of public opinion across the board and everybody is free to express their opinion. But at the same time, you cannot favor one section over the other. And at the same time, the social cohesion has to be maintained so that the democracy is strengthened and it does not undermine the whole principle of democracy. So this was his message today. Very apt for the occasion. And I think there would be a number of leaders around the world who would echo his opinion.
Prime Minister also called for reform of international institutions, and he said the principle of democracy should also guide global governance. What was he trying to convey with this message of global governance? Is it the strengthening of democratic institutions and that will eventually lead to the global governance?
Yes, Sanjay. I think we've seen how international institutions have been undermined by certain countries because of their policies of control, which is not a correct methodology and not the way to go forward. So if you look at what is happening, for example, in the WTO, and the case in point is very clear. It's about the biggest challenge that humanity faces today, which is the global COVID-19 crisis, and after that, the variants which have emerged. Now, if an institution like WTO is compromised and cannot act impartially, then of course we have a big problem. And at the same time, we have international trade, which is governed by the WTO, but it's not allowed to function because its governing bodies are not replenished in time. So this is what he was referring to. He was also referring to the international monetary institutions, the Bretton Woods institutions, for example, which are not fully represented because you have a change in the world order today. There are countries who have emerged, and this is not 1945. We are now in 2021. There are countries like India which actually should have a greater say in governance. We should have more greater say from Brazil, for example. In fact, the whole system of the United Nations which needs to be reformed, and the G4 representation which is being stalled year after year because of interests of countries. So this is what he was referring to. But more immediately, I think it was the issue of global governance where it affects societies across the board on issues which are cutting through countries and through continents.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Sanjay.
The country's first Chief of Defence Staff, CDS General Bipin Rawat, was laid to final rest with full military honours, 17-gun salute at Brar Squad Crematorium in Delhi Cantonment. His last rites were performed along with his wife Madhulika Rawat, who too lost her life in Tamil Nadu chopper crash. Our correspondent reports their daughters Kritika and Tharani performed their last rites.
The funeral procession carrying the mortal remains of General Rawat and Madhulika Rawat began at 2 p.m. from his official residence, 3 Kamras Marg. As the mortal remains carried in a casket wrapped in a tricolor was moved to a gun carriage decorated with flowers, people showered petals and raised slogans in his phrase. Military personnel drawn from all the 3 services marched towards the streets as drummers played along in tribute to India's first Chief of Defence Staff. Thousands thronged the route taken by General Rawat's procession to pay last respects to the country's first Chief of Defence Staff, were raising slogans of Bharat Mata Ki Jai, General Rawat Amar Rahe and Uttarakhand Ka Hira. A total of 800 service personnel were in attendance for the military funeral of the CDS. With moist eyes, people from various walks of life bid tearful adieu to General Rawat at Brar Square Crematorium. Sobhagya, Air News, Delhi.
Human Rights Day is being observed today. The day is celebrated on the 10th of December every year since 1950 in commemoration of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights by the United Nations in 1948. Addressing a Human Rights Day function organized by the National Human Rights Commission in New Delhi, President Ramnath Kovind said that India has saved many lives by providing COVID vaccines to the people of the country. He said COVID-19 pandemic has affected humanity and made a devastating impact on the vulnerable population.
Humanity is grappling with the worst pandemic in the history. While the pandemic is not yet over and the virus seems to be one step ahead of humankind, the world has so far responded to it by placing our trust in science and in global partnership. Though the pandemic affects the humanity universally, it is also seen that it has disproportionately devastating impact on the vulnerable sections of society. In this context, India, despite the obvious challenges, has been able to save millions of lives by adopting a policy of free and universal availability of vaccine. With the biggest vaccination exercise in history, the government has also been able to provide protection against the virus to nearly 1 billion people. I congratulate doctors, scientists and all other corona warriors for their heroic efforts to uphold people's rights to life and right to health.
A special flight arrived at Delhi airport from Kabul in Afghanistan this afternoon carrying 110 stranded persons. The special CAM air flight was arranged by India under Operation Devi Shakti. The External Affairs Ministry said the flight brought 10 Indians and 94 Afghans, including members of the Afghan Hindu-Sikh minority community. 9 children, including 3 infants, were among the evacuees. 3 holy Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji from historical Gurudwaras in Afghanistan and ancient Hindu religious scriptures including Ramayana, Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita were also brought to India by flight. United Nations High Commission for Refugees UNHCR has expressed grave concern at the migration of Afghan people to neighbouring countries. It has warned that the economic collapse of Afghanistan would add to the woes of the people there and trigger a massive wave of migration to the neighbouring and world countries. UN High Commissioner for Refugees Filippo Grandi told Security Council that Taliban and the international community need to adopt ways and means to meet this challenge. He said that the Taliban should deliver on the all-important issues of the rights of women, women at work, rights of minorities, while international community should be concerned about the needs of the citizens there. UN and other humanitarian organizations have underlined the need to reach out to the people in Afghanistan amidst the deterioration of living conditions. Thousands of Afghans still lack access to proper shelter in the harsh winters, and a shattered economy has compounded their woes. This is All India Radio giving you the news. For quick news updates round the clock, follow us on Twitter at AIR News Alerts.
India's COVID-19 vaccination coverage has reached nearly 132 crore landmark milestone. Union Health and Family Welfare Ministry has said more than 68 lakh vaccine doses have been administered. As part of the nationwide vaccination drive, Centre is supporting the states and union territories by providing them COVID vaccines free of cost. At least 54 people have been killed and over 100 injured after the truck they were being transported in crashed in southern Mexico. Authorities say more than 150 people said to be migrants from the Central America were crammed into truck's trailer when it rolled in the state of Chiapas. A report.
Mexico's President Andrés Manuel López Obrador described the crash as very painful and wrote on Twitter that it deeply regrets the tragedy. It is one of the worst accidents of its kind in Mexico. Chiapas Governor Rutilio Escandon said 49 people were confirmed dead at the scene and 5 more died in hospital. He said 105 people, including 22 women, were also injured in the crash. Emergency officials said the victims included men, women and children. The nationalities have not been confirmed. Meanwhile, local officials said most of the people on board were from Honduras and Guatemala. The truck was reportedly speeding when it flipped on a sharp bend and hit a pedestrian bridge on a main road leading to the Chiapas state capital, Tuxtla Gutiérrez. Chiapas, which neighbors Guatemala, is a major transit point for undocumented migrants. The US-Mexico border is the deadliest single crossing in the world, according to data from the International Organization for Migration. According to media report, this year alone, at least 650 people have died trying to cross the border. Abhishek Mukhopadhyay for World News.
In Democratic Republic of Congo, dozens of inmates from Boma prison have escaped in the west part of the country. Meanwhile, 9 inmates were reportedly arrested near the prison and 1 injured as guards fired gunshots in the air. In Pakistan, the Pakistani Taliban has said it won't extend a ceasefire which was agreed upon with the security forces on the 9th of November. The militant group, which is also known as Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, has blamed Islamabad for not honoring the truce and failing to release its 102 fighters. The Pakistani Taliban has been responsible for several attacks on Pakistani security forces and civilians in the last 14 years. The same militant outfit was behind a 2014 attack on an army-run school in Peshawar that killed 154 people, mostly school children. In a statement, TTP spokesman Mohammad Khurasani claimed that despite the ceasefire agreement, security forces are continuing to carry out operations against the group. Hence, it is not possible to carry on with the ceasefire in these circumstances.
India has strongly condemned the barbaric terrorist attack on the convoy of the UN Multidimensional Integrated Stabilization Mission in Mali on the 8th of this month. The attack, which took place in Bandiagara region in Mali, resulted in the killing of 7 UN peacekeepers from Togo. India has extended condolences to the bereaved families of the persons who lost their lives and wished for the speedy recovery of those injured in the terrorist attack. A UK-based tribunal has found that China has committed genocide against the Uyghur people in Xinjiang. The Uyghur tribunal cited birth control and sterilization measures allegedly carried out by China against the Uyghurs. Sir Geoffrey Nice, a prominent British barrister who chaired the tribunal's hearings yesterday, said its panel was satisfied that China had carried out a deliberate, systematic and concerted policy to bring about a long-term reduction of Uyghur and other ethnic minority populations. He added that the panel believed senior officials, including the Chinese President Xi Jinping, bore primary responsibility for the abuses against Muslim minorities in the Xinjiang region. Tribunal's panel was made up of lawyers and academics.
India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi spoke to the distinguished architect Balkrishna Doshi and congratulated him on being awarded the Royal Gold Medal 2022. Mr. Modi said Balkrishna Doshi's contributions to the world of architecture are monumental. The Prime Minister said that his works are globally admired for their creativity, uniqueness and diverse nature. Royal Gold Medal is one of the highest honours for architecture. The 8th Foreign Office consultations between India and Slovenia were held virtually on Friday. Secretary West in the External Affairs Ministry, Renat Sandhu, and State Secretary of Slovenian Foreign Affairs Ministry, Dr. Stanislav Resen, reviewed India-Slovenia bilateral relations. Regional and global issues of mutual interest were also discussed.
India's teenage weightlifting sensation Jeremy Lalrinunga won the gold medal in the men's 67 kg category at the Commonwealth Championships in Tashkent on Friday. The 2018 Youth Olympic gold medalist has lifted the total weight of 305 kg with 141 kg in snatch and 164 kg in clean and jerk. His personal best total is 306 kg with 140 kg in snatch and 166 kg in clean and jerk, which came in 2019. The 19-year-old also created a national record in the snatch event en route his podium finish, but was unable to do the same in the clean and jerk section, where he failed to lift 168 kgs. And now a report from the business world.
BSE Sensex declined by 20 points to end at 58,787. NSE Nifty also slipped by 6 points to finish at 17,511. In global equity markets, Asia Pacific equity indices logged losses amid profit booking. Hong Kong's Hang Seng declined by 1.1% and Japan's Nikkei 225 plunged by 1%. South Korea's Kospi fell 0.6%, while China's Shanghai Composite Index and the Singapore Straits Times Index both slipped 0.2%. European markets were up marginally in intraday trade. Oil prices were on track for the biggest weekly gain since late August. In intraday trade, Brent crude was trading around $75.10 per barrel. And in the foreign exchange market, the rupee weakened by 26 paise against the US dollar. The domestic unit closed at 75 rupees and 78 paise against the US currency. Arjun Chaudhary for World News, All India Radio.
Now let us take a look at the major developments around the world as reported in the foreign press. South China Morning Post reports Hong Kong tightens measures for US arrivals over Omicron, requires first week of 21-day quarantine to be at Penny's Bay government facility. Sputnik News writes Australia to replace European military helicopters with US Black Hawks. The Sydney Morning Herald reports US wins appeal in UK over extradition of WikiLeaks founder Julius Assange. The Washington Post says judge calls Texas abortion laws enforcement tactic unconstitutional but stops short of an injunction. The Guardian writes Scotland faces potential tsunami of cases. Czech Republic makes vaccines mandatory for over 60s. A quick look at the headlines once again. Prime Minister Narendra Modi says India's story is clear message to the world that democracy has delivered and will continue to deliver. India bids adieu to country's first Chief of Defence Staff General Bipin Rawat. Mortal remains of General Rawat and his wife Madhulika consigned to flames with full military honours and a sombre 17-gun salute in national capital Delhi. 110 stranded Indian citizens and Afghan nationals from Hindu and Sikh community airlifted from Kabul. In Mexico, 54 dead and dozens injured in a road accident. And UN agencies express grave concern over humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan. India is celebrating the 152nd birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. Before we end, let us listen to his favorite bhajan, Vaishnav Jan, by artists from Portugal. And with that, we end this bulletin. We will be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.